লেখা উচিত স্কুল লেভেল থেকে ভাবতে হবে। তোমার মনে হচ্ছে না যে স্কুল এডুকেশন এখন ঠিক আছে আমার পেটে
I request everyone to be on mute, please.
একটা সময় প্রমোশন হয়নি।
Let's start the event.
Pooja, start please.
Yeah, Rashmi, we're waiting for the video. We'll play the video.
Pooja, we played it. You want it to be played again?
I'll start. Should we start then, Ujjwala?
Yes, please.
A very good evening. Very good evening to all in India and good morning to our guests from the US. I welcome you to the inaugural webinar of FLO National Education Initiative. And I'm very delighted to welcome our guest speaker for today, Mr. Salman Sal Khan, founder of Khan Academy. From starting with helping his cousin with maths lesson in 2005 to creating micro lectures on YouTube for his family, to now being an immensely successful learning platform, Sal Khan's story is an inspirational story of a social entrepreneur and an educator. After penning down his mission statement, free education for everyone, everywhere, on his kitchen table, there has been no looking back for Sal Khan, who has truly been an innovator in education. We welcome you, Sal, and look forward to an enjoyable and insightful conversation with you. I welcome our President FLO, Ms. Ujjwala Singhania, a successful businesswoman herself. She has set up the National Education Initiative this year. I welcome you, Ujjwala. I'm very happy to welcome all educators, organizational heads, members of FICCI Arise, FICCI, past presidents, governing body members, chapter chairs, and all FLO members. A very warm welcome. I would now like to invite Mr. Manit Jain, Chair FICCI Arise, to brief us about FICCI Arise. I welcome you, Manit.
Thank you, Pooja, and congratulations to the entire FLO community on the launch of the Education Initiative. This day also marks the beginning of a formal association between FICCI Arise and FLO. And just to tell you a little bit about FICCI Arise, we're now a community of about 1,100 schools, almost 100,000 educators, and over 1.5 million students. The mission of the organization is around three areas. One, to get maximum autonomy for schools on the basis of outcomes-based accountability, to partner with the government in several sort of public-private partnerships in the space of education, school education. And we're also looking to uh, uh, make a culture of widespread innovation in education, which is something that we have not seen. So we work alongside CBSE in assessment reforms. We work with NCERT. We work with several state governments and have written many papers in supporting the creation of the national education policy and other initiatives across states and the center. And we're looking forward to working with FLO and getting the support from each one of you to ensure that our mission is successful and we're actually able to bring about some transformation in education. Handing over to the President, Ujjwala Singh, to take this forward.
For that, Manu?
Before that, I would request Vasvi to please introduce our guest.
Good evening, everyone. I am Vasvi Bharatram, past president of FLO and joint vice chairperson of the Sri Ram Schools. It's wonderful to see you here again, Sal. Thank you so much for always so graciously accepting my invitation every time that I have reached out to you. And my deepest apologies for waking you up so early in the morning. I know it's 7 a.m. in Mountain View, California. So we really appreciate you being up and ready to address us today. The last time that we met was in August 2020 when we did an event for YPO. 1 year later, who would have thought that the world would still be battling COVID and education institutions all around the world would either be only partially open or completely shut, as is the case in India today. Online education has really been the only way of keeping children engaged and learning over the past 15 months. And to my mind, the pioneer of online education is Sal Khan. He founded the Khan Academy in 2004, where most of us were not even aware of this concept, with the vision of providing top quality online education absolutely for free for anyone, anywhere in the world. He is also the founder of two more nonprofits, the Khan Lab School and Schoolhouse.world. Khan Academy has also been doing a lot of India-centric work, like conducting modules in Hindi and adapting maths and science lessons to the CBSE curriculum, along with creating an app to address the gaps in learning caused due to COVID. And we look forward to hearing more about all these, Sal. Sal Khan has been profiled by 60 Minutes, featured on the cover of Forbes magazine, and recognized as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. And in case the teachers here are wondering what is his own educational background, he has 3 degrees from MIT and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Khan Academy is used in more than 190 countries, has 120 million registered users, and nearly 20 million learners per month. With the onset of COVID, the whole world going online, the usage of this platform has soared from 30 million minutes of learning a day to an average of 75 million minutes of learning per day, and is growing constantly. It's hard to even imagine these mind-boggling numbers. And maybe that's why Sal Khan has been referred to as the teacher to humanity and considered to be one of the most impactful people on the planet. Before we hear from Sal about his inspiring journey, I would like to invite President FLO Ujjwala Singhania to give us her welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasvi. Namaste and a very good evening to everyone. Nelson Mandela had very aptly said, education is the most powerful weapon in which you can change the world. Today, we have with us a man on a mission of providing a free world-class education for anyone and everywhere. Recognized as one of the Time's 100 most influential people in the world, Mr. Khan joins us in an exclusive conversation to mark the launch of FLO Education Initiative. In his book, The One World Schoolhouse, Education Reimagined, he outlines his vision for the future of education. I believe that education is the first step for people to gain knowledge, for critical thinking, empowerment, and skills they need to make this world a better place. It has been over 15 months now on the onset of global pandemic, school closures, remote learning, and digitization. Education system has not only become challenging, but also uncertain. At the same time, the role of student in adapting the current needs a lot of strategic thinking. With the dust settles from this year, what will education look like and what it would aspire to? Mr. Khan, with his intense experience in this sector, will share his thoughts on this and more. FLO Education Initiative aims to bring together all stakeholders from this sector and work towards a more empowered and strengthened community of educators. Education is a passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Mr. Khan, please accept our sincere appreciation and gratitude for being with us today. May I request the IT to share the virtual token of appreciation for Mr. Khan? May I now request Mr. Khan to address our audience? Thank you.
Well, thank you all. That was an incredibly generous introduction. I have mixed feelings about it. I always like to have low expectations going into something, so I'll do my best. You know what I'll do. One of the big themes from the pandemic that we've been telling educators. Actually, we were telling educators before people had to teach on Zoom. Is the best classrooms are the ones that are interactive, the ones that it's not just one person lecturing to others. So what I'll do is I'll give you a little bit of a background. It sounds like a lot of folks are familiar with Khan Academy in different ways, but I'll give a little background of how I fell into this, a little bit about our philosophy of how we might be able to collectively provide a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And we'll talk about the pandemic, but I want to leave as much space as possible to make this interactive and to take questions from all of y'all. So as was introduced, Khan Academy started in a very serendipitous, in a very happenstance way. I've always been intrigued by education, but for various reasons, I ended up in different fields. Out of college, I ended up working in the tech industry, and then I ended up going to business school. Out of business school, I ended up working as an analyst at a hedge fund. And it was a year out of business school, 2004. I had just gotten married in Boston. My family was visiting from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And it just came out of conversation. My aunt, uncle, and their kids were staying at my apartment in Boston. And Nazrat Auntie told me that her daughter, Nadia, my cousin, was having trouble in math. And so when Nadia came into the room, I said, Nadia, what's going on? And she was 12 years old. And she said, well, I just have trouble with unit conversion, you know, converting kilometers to miles or ounces to gallons or whatever else. And I always found Nadia to be a very fun, bright, interesting young woman. So I said, Nadia, I'm 100% sure you are capable of understanding unit conversion. How about when you go back to New Orleans, if you're up for it, I'm happy to tutor you remotely. And she agreed. And so she goes back to New Orleans. I think she was a little bit skeptical, but she was willing to give it a shot. And we at the time, there was no Zoom, there was no Google Meet. So we used speakerphone, we used conference lines, we used to use instant messenger, whatever we could to communicate. Eventually, we did find some tools that had like a digital scratch pad that we could share with each other. But you know, the first few weeks was just trying to convince Nadia that she was capable of doing really well. Then she slowly got unit conversion, actually quickly got it once she got that personal attention. She got caught up with her class. She frankly got a little ahead of her class. And at that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called up her school because she had done not so well on a placement exam the previous year. They were putting her into a slower math track. And so I called her school and I said, you know, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. And they actually let her take the placement exam again. And the same Nadia who thought that she couldn't understand unit conversion a few months ago was then placed into an advanced math track. And frankly, by that summer, I was taking college level mathematics at the local university. And so I was hooked. I enjoyed my day job, but it was also really nice to be able to connect with family who was 1,500 miles away. I always enjoyed teaching and learning and all subject matter, but especially in math and in science. So I was getting a lot of psychological reward out of it. So I started tutoring Nadia's younger brothers. And before I know it, word spreads in my family that free tutoring is going on. And so I found myself with 10, 15 cousins, family, friends from around the country every day after work. And I saw a common pattern. The reason why they needed tutoring in the first place, the reason why they were sometimes struggling with, especially in subjects like mathematics, it wasn't because they didn't have some innate ability. It wasn't because the subject matter was fundamentally difficult. In most cases, it was because they had gaps in their knowledge from previous years. And so what I started doing is writing software for them that can give them practice, that I, as their tutor, could make sure that they had a strong foundation. And then, and give them as much practice as they need to fill in gaps. You can imagine if you're in an algebra class and you are, let's say you didn't really master decimals from the 5th grade, or you didn't really master negative numbers from the 6th or 7th grade, it's very hard to engage in that algebra class. But in a traditional academic model, you can get an 80% on dividing decimals in 5th grade. The whole class has moved on to the next concept, probably a concept that builds on those gaps. So I was seeing that between my tutoring and the software I was writing for them, it was really starting to unlock their potential. They were able to start to learn a lot faster once they had these strong foundations. I called the software Khan Academy almost as a joke. It was me and my family, and the domain name was available. And then in 2006, I was at a dinner party. All my friends knew that I had this crazy hobby tutoring my family. And the host of the dinner party said, "Sal, this is all cool what you're doing, but how are you scaling your actual lessons?" And his name's Zuli. I give him full credit. And I said, "Zuli, you're right. It's hard to do with 15 cousins what I was originally doing with 1 or 2. And he said, "Well, why don't you record some lessons on video and upload them onto YouTube for your family?" And I initially said that is a horrible idea, Zuli. YouTube is for dogs on skateboards. It is for cats playing piano. It is not for serious learning. But I went home that weekend, got over the idea that it wasn't my idea, and I gave it a shot. And I just started covering the things that I found that my cousins were asking for a lot. One cousin would ask for it one week, then another cousin would ask it for the next week. So I said, well, if I make a video on it, then they can get it whenever they want. And I told my cousins, tell me what you want to cover and I'll make videos. And after about a month, I asked them for feedback, and they famously told me that they liked me better on YouTube than in person. And so I took that as positive feedback. And really what they were saying is they really appreciated, I think they appreciated being able to access me live over the phone, but they also really appreciated having an on-demand version of their cousin. It could be 2 a.m, and if they needed help with something, they could access it. They didn't have to feel embarrassed if they were a 9th grader or 10th grader, but they needed to review some of their arithmetic or some of their pre-algebra. There was no shame associated with it. They could just do it. They didn't have to feel like they're wasting someone's time. So I kept going. Before I knew it, YouTube is a very public platform, and I didn't make the videos private. Before I knew it, people who are not my cousins were using it, and they started sending some really powerful letters saying, "This is the reason I was able to pass my algebra exam. This is the reason my children are able to keep up with their classes." I even got letters from people in the military saying how while they were deployed and they want to go back to college when they come back to the States, they've been using this. I remember in the early days, I got a letter from a terminal cancer patient saying that her dream was to learn mathematics at a high level. It was actually calculus in particular, and she was going to use these videos in the few months she had left to learn her lifelong dream. So I kept going. You can imagine this ended up being a hobby that started to overtake my life. By 2009. There was about 50 to 100,000 folks who were using these resources, not just the videos, but also the software. In fact, so many people were using the software, I had to shut it down for a little while. But I sat down with my wife. We had my first child had just been born. So our expenses had gone up. My wife was a medical resident at this point. But, we all agreed that there seems like there's something here. And the social return for this type of an effort could be off the charts. So, we kind of agreed, all right, we're saving for a down payment on a house. Maybe we could live off of savings for a little bit. So I took the plunge. We set up Khan Academy as a not-for-profit organization, as y'all introduced, mission-free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And, I kind of said, surely the universe will conspire to support this effort that could reach so many folks. But I think anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, and I know there's a lot of educators on this chat, and I also know that there's a lot of entrepreneurs here, you have to start with that delusional optimism. But usually once you take the plunge, you realize that maybe you were a little bit delusional and a little bit too optimistic, and you get a lot of rejections. And that first year, I would say, was incredibly difficult. You definitely wake up in the middle of the night wondering, what have you done to your career? What have you done to your family? You're living off of savings. You're trying to start a not-for-profit using technology in a way that really there's no archetype for it. There's no good example to point to that, like, we're going to be like them. So it was tough. But I was getting a few $100 donations every now and then. It was helping a little bit. But then in May of 2010, we got our first significant donation from someone by the name of Andor, and it was a $10,000 donation. It just came through on PayPal. And I immediately emailed her, said, dear Ann, thank you so much for this incredibly generous donation, largest donation we've ever gotten at Khan Academy. If we were a physical school, you would now have a building named after you. And Ann immediately wrote back saying, well, I can't believe this is the largest donation. I see that you're in Mountain View. I'm in Palo Alto. These are neighboring towns. If you're free, I'd love to have lunch sometime. So we actually met at an Indian buffet restaurant in Palo Alto, and over lunch, Ann's like, what's your goal here? And I said, well, when I fill out the paperwork with the government to be a nonprofit, I filled out free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And Ann said, well, that's ambitious, Sal. How do you plan to do that? And I said, well, we're in a point in history where the delivery of information, the delivery of interactivity, the marginal cost of it, we can deliver for close to zero. Obviously, there's some real fixed costs. You have to create the content, you have to put it on servers, et cetera, but the marginal cost can be pretty low. And I showed her the traffic on Khan Academy. I showed her the videos. I used to walk around with a binder of all of the letters I was getting from people from around the world. I told Ann, it's not just videos, it's not just English. I want to translate it or create new content for all of the languages of the world. I want to make it so that any student could learn at their own time and pace. I even had some, at the time, nascent teacher tools, so that we all know every teacher has 30 kids, sometimes more, students in their classroom. The students are all at different levels. The teacher wishes they could cater to the needs of every individual student, but it's very hard without help. So I told Ann, what if Khan Academy could be a way that every student could learn at their own pace, teachers can get real-time information, and then do more focused interventions with the kids who need help, or even better, get the kids to help each other. And I remember Ann saying, well, Sal, this is all very interesting, and it seems like you've made a surprising amount of progress. I only have one question. How are you supporting yourself? And in as proud of a way as possible, I said, I'm not. And, she kind of processes that. We part ways. And then about 20 minutes later, I'm driving into my driveway, actually where I live now in Mountain View, California. And I got a text message from Ann, and it said, you really need to be supporting yourself, Sal. I've just wired you $100,000. So that was a good day, a little bit. And frankly, it became the beginning of more and more crazy events, good crazy events. 2 months later, I was running a summer camp for 7th graders, because I've never viewed online education as a replacement for physical education. I always imagine online education as a way to liberate. If students could get lectures at their own time and pace, if they can get practice and feedback at their own time and pace, give teachers more real-time data, then it can liberate the physical classroom to focus on more human-to-human interaction. We can tutor each other in the classroom. We can have Socratic dialogue. We can do games, simulations to get a deeper understanding of the concepts. So I was running a summer program with a bunch of middle school students where I was actually running a trading platform. I was teaching them how stock markets work. So I was literally like a trading floor of 12 and 13-year-olds. And I start getting text messages from Ann, which you can imagine I now take very seriously. And the text messages essentially said, this was Ann writing, hi, Sal, I'm in Aspen, Colorado. I'm at the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'm in the main pavilion. Bill Gates on stage, last 5 minutes talking about Khan Academy. So I didn't know what to make of it. I immediately throw a 7th grader off of a computer and I start looking for this information that Ann is referring to. And I found it. Bill Gates randomly, when he was asked, what are you excited about? Starts saying, well, there's a site called Khan Academy. I've been using it myself. I've been using it with my children. And you can imagine, I was looking at it, I was like, is this a dream? Is this really happening? Like, I had no clue that he even knew what Khan Academy was. And then I was like, well, what is the next step? I remember dinner with my wife that night. What do I do? Do I call him? How do I get his phone number? And a couple of weeks passed, and 2 weeks later, I got I was about to record a video, actually in this room that I'm right now. It's a walk-in closet, and I get a call. It was a Seattle number. I say hello, and hi, this is Larry Cohen. I'm Bill Gates' chief of staff. You might have heard that Bill's a fan, and I was like, yeah, I heard that. And if you're free over the next few weeks, we'd love to fly up to Seattle. And I was looking at my calendar for the month, and it was completely blank. And so I said, yeah, maybe next Wednesday. We got to do some laundry, but I'm happy to meet with Bill. But we had that meeting, and I told them the same thing that I told Ann at around the same time. And all these things started happening all at once. Folks from Google reached out. Google's actually in the same town here in Mountain View where I live. And they wanted to do a project that they thought had a shot of educating the world one day. And they reached out, and they were actually surprised that I was just one guy in a walk-in closet 2 miles away from their office trying to figure out if I'm going to be able to pay all my bills. But they too said, what would you do with more resources? And I told them the same answer. And so 2010 was when we got our first real philanthropic support to become a real organization. And, since then, as everyone introduced, it's been an amazing ride, that I still look back on and I'm surprised. But if you go fast forward to today, as was introduced, the pandemic just further reinforced these ideas that students need to be able to learn without being bound by time or space. The pandemic has reinforced these ideas that there's a large variance in student learning and understanding. We need to figure out ways to reach every student where they are. A lot of people are talking about learning loss and summer slide and unfinished learning and gaps in learning. These are things we've always strongly believed are the reasons why students are being held back. And we just have to give them the opportunities and the incentives to fill in those gaps. And that's what technology can be useful for. And before I turn over questions, I'll say one last thing. People are surprised to hear me say it because I'm so associated with online education. But if I had to pick between an amazing in-person teacher experience versus the fanciest technology on the planet, I would pick the in-person experience because there's just so much about human connection. But luckily, we don't have to make that trade-off. The ideal is the best of both worlds. And when we think about using technology, it should never be technology for technology's sake. It should always be, what is our pedagogical goal, or what is our social emotional goal? And then think about, what are the tools? What are the simplest tools that actually can get us there? And so for me, the one that we're very focused on is students all have different gaps, different needs. They're ready to learn at different paces. Teachers don't have enough information in a traditional model. By the time they get the test scores, it's ready to move on to the next concept. So you can't really act on the test scores. And so ours is, can we give the teachers the real-time information? Can we give districts, principals the real-time information, and parents? Can we give students immediate feedback? Can we let them learn in their zone of proximal development, right at their learning edge? So it's not too easy, not too hard. Give them ways that they can fill in their gaps without falling behind. Those are the goals. And that's where we think technology could be really interesting. As it was introduced, I started another not-for-profit during the pandemic called Schoolhouse.world that many of y'all might be interested in on multiple levels, but it's the same idea. And here, it was when the pandemic started, there's a realization it's great. All these millions and millions of people are using Khan Academy to get practice, feedback, get micro lessons in the form of videos, but the human-to-human interaction is so powerful. What if we could create a way that anyone on the planet can get free tutoring, live free tutoring over Zoom? And the way we thought about doing that is we believe there's a lot of people who want to give back to other folks. And actually, there's a lot of students who are capable of tutoring peers or near peers. And by tutoring, they could get credit, they could get recognition, it could help them with college admissions, it could help them getting internships, things like that. And so we launched the prototype last summer, and it's been working. And now, it's already many, many thousands of students, and we hope to scale to millions over the coming year. So it's an interesting time with the pandemic. It's been suboptimal for so many folks, but I do think as everything has been thrown up in the air, all of us collectively really do have a lot of agency in deciding how it falls back. And I think we can create a world that was better than the world that entered the pandemic. So I'll stop talking and I'll answer questions about anything.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khan. You're truly so inspiring. I would like to ask you, in 2004, you had a small startup, but with a big dream of free online education for anyone, everywhere. What was your sustainability model of Khan Academy then, and what it is now? What are your main challenges in scaling up?
Yeah, good question. In 2004, my sustainability model was I had another job. that was the model then. And that frankly was the model for the next 5 years. I had a job, but I was able to find time to work on this. At the time, 2-3 hours a day, sometimes 4 hours a day. In 2009, the theory, and I had never worked at a non-for-profit, and there's a deep irony here. In business school, there was a class called social enterprise, which is about not-for-profits, and that was the only class. At Harvard Business School, they didn't really fail anyone, but they would give you the grades were 1, 2, or 3. A 1 means you did exceptional, top 10% in that class. A 2 means you did what you were expected to do. You were in the middle 80%. And a 3 meant you were in the bottom 10% of that class. I only got 1 3 while I was in business school, and that was in social entrepreneurship. So it's so I went into this not knowing a lot about social enterprise. I actually was skeptical of a lot of social enterprises going into it. But once this was getting traction and thousands of people and tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands, and obviously now it's hundreds of millions, but back then when they were using it, I live in Silicon Valley. I was working as a hedge fund. A ton of my friends are entrepreneurs and venture capitalists and all this. And people were approaching me saying, hey, we'll write a check. We can start this as a venture-backed for-profit. And it was intriguing because I'm not against, becoming very financially successful and all of that. But it was always the second or third meetings where there just felt something a little bit off about it. I was getting so many letters from people around the world saying how it was affecting their lives in powerful ways. And I thought, well, if I put a paywall on this, which I would eventually have to do if I took some investor money, that person in Indonesia who sent me that letter last week might not be able to tap into it. And so, I started studying not-for-profits. So, the only organizations that truly hold true to a mission over multiple generations and put the mission before anything else are not-for-profits. And it was delusional. I was one guy in a walk-in closet. But I said, maybe, just as in the physical world, you have physical institutions like schools, like many of y'all work at or run. You have libraries, you have museums, you have the great universities. The somewhat delusional vision is, hey, we now have a virtual world with the internet. But wouldn't it be great if the internet also had institutions that leveraged the uniqueness of what the internet can do? And the dream back then, and Wikipedia already existed, and I was always very inspired by that. I remember, actually, I was incredibly inspired when, I don't know if many of y'all remember, in the late 90s, many universities were figuring out how to try to monetize online courses. And it was in 2000 that MIT, where I had gone, I was very proud of them at the time. They said, you know what, this isn't about monetization. On our own dime, we're going to record all of our classes and give them for free online, in MIT OpenCourseWare. And I remember I didn't realize at the time, I was doing a job I was working at Oracle at the time. I just saw a press release. I was like, that's cool. I'm proud of MIT that they did that. But that was part of the inspiration too. I was like, if where I went to college can be true to their principles, I should give it a shot. Since then, the main financial, there's really 2 or 3 pieces for our business model, so to speak. One is philanthropy, is to make the case that the social return on investment on Khan Academy is really off the charts. We've done the calculation. A lot of good philanthropies, a good social return on investment, depending on how you calculate it, could be 5 to 1, 10 to 1, 10 times whatever it takes to run it. Khan Academy, even conservative estimates because of its scale, is 500 to 1 to 1,000 to 1. And that's at the scale we are now. If we can scale to 1 billion, then the return is going to be 5,000 to 1. It's hopefully we can continue to make that case. Our budget is the budget of a large high school in the US, but we, as y'all know, we reach over 100 million folks every year. So make that case, but we're also building some revenue models. We're working with school districts. A lot of school districts we offer a lot for free, but then they wanted support and training and integration with their rostering systems and things like that. So we have like a service model we've done. We have a lot of corporations that have been sponsoring work, which they want to do out of social good, but it also helps their brand and builds affinity with their employees. We're the official practice for the SAT, which is the main admissions test in the US for college. Many of y'all are familiar with it, but they pay us to do that as well. So we have some earned revenue streams as well, but it's still primarily philanthropy.
Great. Thank you so much, Sal, for that. Sal, I would want to know that during the past year plus, we've had a massive shift to digital and remote learning. It's been a very unprecedented time. And how ready were you for this at your organization? And also, what kind of adjustments you had to make at Khan Academy to deal with this kind of a change?
Yeah, well, I guess, there's ready on two different levels. There's ready at kind of internally how well to handle like remote work and all that. And there's readiness for the demand. We first caught wind that this might happen. I remember in February, we got a letter from a teacher in South Korea saying that how he was using Khan Academy to keep his kids learning through their nationwide school closures. And that was the first time. I mean, that wasn't being reported on the news here in the US that like South Korea had shut down its schools. And so when I read that, I was like, wow, a whole country has shut down its schools because of this pandemic. And then it didn't take me long to realize, oh, wow, several other countries had also in Asia and East Asia had already done it. And that's when I remember we had a meeting with our leadership team at Khan Academy. Is like, well, maybe this will happen in the US, maybe it'll happen in the rest of the world. And it still seemed a little bit science fiction that could possibly happen. But we did realize that if it did happen, people would probably turn to us because they would look for something that's aligned to standards, that covers multiple subjects and grades, that's trusted, that can work in both a classroom environment with teachers, but also could work at home or students could use on their own. And we're available in 50 languages, and many of the languages in India and the Indian subcontinent as well. So, we did start preparing. Thinking that, it's like not likely to happen, but just in case. So we started stress testing our servers. What if we were to see 3x the traffic? What would we recommend to people if schools started to shut down? And then frankly, it was by, within a week and a half, where I live in California was where I believe there was the first community spread in the United States, Santa Clara County in Silicon Valley. And and there was a local private school that had to shut down because of contact tracing. And so that's when it got very real for us. And I was also in meetings, as y'all mentioned, I started a school, so I'm also on the board of that school. And we were talking about contingency planning for having to shut down the school. And so that's when on the Khan Academy side, we're like, we got to take this really seriously. And then I remember it was Friday, I think it was the first Friday of March of 2020. That's when California, which I believe was the first state in the US to announce that it was going to close their schools the coming Monday. And that weekend was a crazy weekend. We said, all right, we got to just make sure we're up and running. We got to make sure, let's see if we can provide some leadership to folks on what pandemic schooling could look like. Most schools were caught flat-footed. So we wanted parents to understand what can they do with their children using Khan Academy, other things. How do you make sure they also had time outside? And, I started recommending, a lot of my friends saw our daily schedule. Some of it was using Khan Academy, but I also said, do yoga with Adrian on YouTube. And my friend's like, oh, Sal, you wrote that because you do yoga with Adrian. And so, but yeah, we just tried to keep up with that. And then we just saw that, what we thought was a upper bound of 3 times traffic actually ended up by the end of that week, what was the traffic we were seeing. And so we were just trying to keep pace with all of that.
Sal, with lack of access to technology, how can most children in developing countries benefit from tech-driven platforms like Khan Academy? This is a question that I see repeating a lot in the chat box as well. Do you think the pandemic has actually increased disparity, economic disparity, and educational disparity in the world?
Simple answer is, yeah, I think it has. I think in the short term, near term, it absolutely has, because a lot of people have talked about kind of a K-shaped recovery in the economy, where those of us who are able to do work from Zoom, work remotely, work in technology related industries, those folks have done just fine. And actually, I mean, if you look at the stock markets globally, they've done more than fine. They've done very, very well in this environment, while service workers, people who own or run restaurants, et cetera, it's been incredibly difficult time period for them. So you've seen this divergence, and you've seen the same things in academics where, this has been suboptimal for everyone, but my children, I'm guessing most of your children, they kept learning. And there's definitely even cases where, because of the flexibility of pandemic learning, they were able to find things that resonated with them. They were able to take resources depending on how well their school adapted to this. They were able to get that, but then, parents who are at least middle class or upper middle class or affluent were able to also supplement it with other things. And so that created a larger divergence. And we're seeing also globally, the digital divide, how many kids just couldn't access properly. And it's not just about having a device, it's about having a device so that every member of the family can use it and it's supported and they can, and has enough bandwidth to actually do the work. But we also know that there's a good fraction of kids that just have fallen off the radar. I live in a pretty good neighborhood, upper middle class neighborhood. One of my neighbors is a school teacher. And I was surprised when she told me that even in our neighborhood, about 10% of the kids she has lost track of. She has no idea. And every now and then one of the students will show up after 3-4 months of just being absent, and she can see how their skills have degraded because they haven't had the interaction, they haven't had that academics. And this isn't a good neighborhood. Imagine what's happening in poorer neighborhoods and rural areas where there's less resources. The silver lining, though, is even though this has been a source of inequality or inequity over the course of the pandemic has put it on everyone's radar to try to close the digital divide as quickly as possible. And every state, country is in a different state level, but everywhere I've talked, India, United States, Brazil, people are talking about this. So I think that bodes well for, as we go out of the pandemic, I think we've accelerated the desire to realize, internet, having a digital access at home, it really is like clean drinking water or electricity or heating. And we know not everyone in the world has those things either, but we do expect that most people should have those things. So I'm hopeful. In the interim, we always want to work with people. If people are using our content in a non-commercial way, they could take it on DVDs and use it. But obviously the best experience is when you can get the interaction where you can, and it's also useful for us to understand who we're impacting. So we're trying to work on ways to reach as many people as possible.
I would like to take a question from the chat from Arushi Chawla. Mr. Khan, what is the next big thing you're planning for Khan Academy or otherwise?
Yeah, there's a lot of potential next big things, or there are, one of it, I'm very excited about the localization. I'm very excited about the work we're doing in India. Sandeep Bapna, many of y'all know, he's our India lead. So there's some exciting things there in terms of content areas, in terms of localization. In most of India, we are redoing, it's not just translations, we are redoing the content to be aligned to standards and to make sure that it culturally really resonates with Indian learners and Indian students. On top of that, we're doing, we have a very comprehensive math offering already from really pre-K through the core of college. We are doing a similar push in science. We've always had science, but now middle school, high school, early college science, we're doing comprehensively. We have an app called Khan Academy Kids, which is reading, writing, social, emotional learning, and math. That's for ages 2 to 7. It's in English right now, but we've actually gotten feedback even in places like India that's actually incredibly useful, because I think y'all all know that in India, if a student can have just even functional English, it can increase their earning power later in their life by a significant amount. So that apps had become very, very popular during the pandemic. Everything I'm mentioning is free, not commercial. The schoolhouse.world, I think we have a shot of creating the world's free global tutoring platform. That's a big idea. So very excited about that. And it actually might even create new ways to show what people know. We've been talking to universities, University of Chicago, which is one of the most selective universities in the US. We're talking to other universities like it, where they're realizing, yes, it's good to look at students' grades or test scores, but it's even more powerful. What if a student is an amazing tutor of calculus? What if they are an amazing tutor of biology? That student then clearly not only knows the subject matter, but they can also communicate. They also have empathy. They're also helping other people. Those are the students that you want to admit into your university. Those are the students that you want to give an internship or give a job to. So I think there's interesting things on the credentialing front. And we just continue to work on how do we make the interactive software in Khan Academy more engaging, more adaptive. We're trying to think about how to improve on our teacher tools. But it's just keep adding more content, make it more engaging, provide as many supports as possible, all the way to tutoring, and then figure out ways, credentials, so that can lead to opportunity, whether it's in college or jobs or whatever else.
No, Ujjwala, I wanted to shoot a question. Sal, given the manner in which technology is advancing, given now algorithms, given that you can individualize the experience for students, particularly in mathematics, I know there's some distance to travel for you, but by the time you get there, say in another 5 or 10 years, how do you see the role of physical schools and teachers evolving? Do you see like this is something that physical schools should be doing, and this is something the teacher should be doing, and this is something that is ideally handled by technology? Do you have a kind of a vision for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons why I started a physical school is so that we could try out these ideas and show that it's doable, or learn the ones that are not as easy as originally assumed. But education is a large spectrum of things, and I think traditionally education is focused on this side, which is, okay, make sure students have the basic skills, basic content knowledge, and even that's a struggle. I mean, we know globally very few kids, even when they take the courses, really master them, really have attraction. So the system has historically been focused here, and it's historically been focused in a mechanism where we group kids together, move them at the same pace, give lectures, ask them to do homework, give them a test, but by the time the test comes in, time to move on to the next concept. I think the schools that will thrive in the future are the ones that say, oh wait, kids can get introduction to material online. Kids can get practice and feedback online. Teachers can get real time. Every time a student practices on an online platform, it's also standardized assessment. So in theory, you can have continuous, the technical, continuous formative assessment, understand where kids are. And not only, in a traditional classroom, you have one shot at that test. Your grade is your grade. It goes in your transcript. You get a C, you're labeled a C student. But now if every point of practice is really continuous assessment, if you're at 80%, we can tell the student, hey, you just haven't mastered it yet. Keep working on it until you get to 90, 95 or 100%. Or if you need to move on, go back at some point and make sure you fill in those gaps. And so what can happen in the classroom is that you can actually maximize human to human interaction. We see this at our lab school. We see this actually at a lot of schools around the country. Humanities courses have always done this. When you think about college seminars, the teacher doesn't read the book to you. The teacher says, read this book. And when we come into the room, we as human beings are going to have a conversation about it. But especially in a lot of math and science classes, that hasn't historically been the case. Or sometimes a humanities class, a teacher will lecture instead of having a conversation. But now the lecture can happen whenever kids want. The practice can happen. So I think that the schools, the colleges that will do well are the ones that when human beings are there, they are talking to each other, they are helping each other, they're tutoring each other. Schoolhouse.world is really just trying to scale something that I hope will happen in every classroom. When all of us were in schools, we were told to put our fingers in our lips and not talk, right? If a friend needed help and you tried to whisper to your friend, hey, this is how you would do this equation, you'd get reprimanded. Hey, stop talking. Like, what? I want the exact opposite to happen, that the teacher's like, hey, Sal, your friend is having difficulty. Can you help them? Can you tutor them right now? And then I'm going to work. And then I, as a teacher, are going to work with these other 5 kids. Not only is that going to be more engaging for everyone, not only is that, I believe, going to be far more effective for everyone, but it's going to be energizing for kids. Kids will, as human beings, I think we love learning. As human beings, we love to be socializing with each other. But I think so much of traditional education we've kind of broken that a little bit by forcing kids to sit passively and listen the whole time. So yeah, that's my view of, and I think there's all sorts of things we can address. Do you have to separate kids by age or perceived ability level anymore? Because now they can all work on their own track and be facilitated by the teacher or really by other students. Can we create a lot more space for creating portfolios of projects? Can the transcript of the future be mastery based, where if you ever get a C, that's where you were at that moment, but you can go back and change that to a B or an A. I have, even at our lab school, we had a new teacher, and some of the older students, she says, they're going back and they're, one of the students went and he had a, not mastered yet in his coding. And then he went back and he got it mastered. It feels like he's cheating. And I'm like, well, what was the issue? Well, the thing that he hadn't mastered when in 9th grade was on for loops. And I was like, well, has he mastered that yet? And the teacher's like, of course he has. He's actually interning as NASA as a software engineer. Of course he knows for loops. And so I said, what was wrong was that then to have the C on the transcript, because it's clearly incorrect information. The student clearly has mastered that concept. It's actually wrong to not let the student go back and show that they know that material. So I think that should be the kind of the transcript of the future.
Okay. I have a question from Piyush in the chat box, and this one is an interesting one, Sal. It says, if you were to build Khan Academy today, with all your experience in today's technology landscape, what things would you have done differently at Khan Academy?
If I had done differently, I would say one thing is there is a bit of an organic, you take twists and turns. And one of the things that we talk internally in our organization, we keep talking about a pendulum swinging, where we're always trying to find the middle ground, or how do we solve the tension between some of these utopian ideas that I just told y'all about every student learning at their own pace and mastery learning and all of these things. And frankly, where classrooms are, where classrooms and teachers are in a more of a synchronous, lesson aligned practice, teachers making assignments. And so, it's taken us a few years to figure out, okay, how do we support teachers with assignments, but maybe use that as a hook into personalization. And even now there's some things that I would say are suboptimal about what we do. It's not easy to go back between these things. So, if I had do-overs, I would have gotten straight to that, what I now think is the solution to make this a very continuous model for teachers, where they can start with us making assignments. And even then it's super useful for them because kids will get feedback, supports, teachers get real-time data. But then over time, as they use the product, the kids can start to move at their own time and pace, and teachers can start to feel comfort with students moving at their own time and pace. So I would have gone more directly there. I would say I often, Khan Academy isn't a large organization. We're 200 folks, but we're still a lot larger than we used to be. And I do miss some, when we were a 10 or 15 person organization, it was easier to be very focused and move fast. And we still are small and nimble compared to most of the world. I don't know if I would do anything different, because we are trying to serve hundreds of millions of folks. So it's really hard to imagine us having a lot less, but I probably would have thought about ways to be even more on the side of scrappiness, because I think there is something very powerful there. Other things, I would have meditated more. I do that a lot now. I meditate every day, 30 minutes to an hour. But I'd say anyone doing, when you realize how many sleepless nights you have because you got worked up about something, or because you're stressed about something, and it was really useless to be so worked up, and to, really just to be able to meditate and let go and realize, I'm a big fan of Vedic philosophy, and many of y'all might be familiar with the notion of sattva. You can do things with a rajasic motivation where you're focused on the outcomes, and that's what most of us do most of the time. But that really does set you up for suffering, because when you get attached to the outcome may or may not happen, and then you're going to be disappointed. But if you just focus on doing the next right thing, which is, sattva, the sattvic action, then first of all, you're more likely to do the right thing. You're more likely to take action, but then the chips fall where they do. And then you see, okay, what happened? And then you use that next information to do the next right thing. And I think whenever you're trying to do anything, the word passion in Greek actually comes from the word for suffering. So I think everyone here is probably passionate about learning, but that can sometimes lead to suffering. And so sometimes it's healthy sometimes to have I would say, a loving detachment of your work. I would have done that more.
That was so beautifully put, Sal. I have been wondering, and I'm really curious. It is a documented psychological fact that a lot of the times anything offered free of charge, without charge, is not as appreciated as something that you pay a lot of money for. Especially that mindset exists in developing nations. Yet you have successfully managed to get 119 million subscribers on Khan Academy. How did you manage to get around that mindset? How did you change that mindset?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is an interesting psychological quirk. And you're right. Ironically, in in poorer regions or more middle or developing regions, this mindset, people are just so cynical. They don't believe, in the US, a Bill Gates who can clearly afford anything, there's a belief that no, there's actually some very good things for free, and actually some of the best things are free here. And Khan Academy is hopefully people perceive it that way. But even in the US, we've seen where, because a school has already paid for some software tool, it's funny, the principal or the teacher will say, oh yeah, we know y'all are better. In fact, I only use Khan Academy with my own kids, but the district has just had a 5-year license on some software tool that no one's ever heard of. So we feel like we have to use it because we paid money for it, even though they themselves say, I wouldn't want to use that for my own kids. I use Khan Academy for my own kids. In India, we've seen this even more, where there's just a strong perception that, okay, there must be a catch. There's no way that something is free could be better than something that could cost hundreds of dollars in many cases. And so we're trying to chip away at that perception. I think it really just, the irony when our India efforts in India have been focused, like we want to reach, I saw a question on the message board, we want to reach the mass of India. We want to reach the kids, but it's really the savvy kids in India, who many of whom are looking to come to the US to go to school, who are really getting that, hey, Khan Academy is pretty valuable. I'm using it. And these are obviously the kids that don't need something that's free, but it's a signal that it's high quality. So yeah, we want to help change that perception in India, and see how we can make progress there.
Fantastic. I think it's time to wrap up, and I'd like to invite Vaspi Bharatram, who's our past FLO president, and who instantly also helped us get Sal to this wonderful platform to share all this information with us and for this great chat. Vaspi, please, I invite you to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Nupur. Before I do that, I just wanted to ask Sal one question. How can we support you? Is there anything that we can do from here to support you?
Oh, well, so many things. Spread the word, make sure people know, and y'all should know that, really look at Khan Academy and compare it against things that could be very costly. And I think you'll be, impressed. And look at the India offerings. I don't think there's enough awareness in India of just how much work is being done by Sandeep and his team for alignment to the standards and in the various local languages. So spread the word there. Think about using it in your schools with your students. We have 50 efficacy studies done on Khan Academy. I believe we are the most studied EdTech platform by an order of magnitude. Once again, going back to, none of these ones that cost money have anywhere near the amount of research done on them, because frankly, they're not as open and transparent about it. So look at that. And also, if anyone here is in a position, we are not for profit. As I mentioned, we are philanthropically supported. If you're finding value out of it, if you want to make sure that other young people in India and the rest of the world have access to these types of resources, whether it's your corporation, your school, or your family, donations of all levels make a difference.
Thank you. So thank you, Sal. Thank you so much for your time, your vision, your life, your work are all truly inspirational to us. And we are very grateful for all the amazing insights and learnings. And just on a lighter note, I want to tell you that even though you got 1 in your HBS class on social entrepreneurship, when you Google social entrepreneurship, your name is one of the first ones that comes up. I don't know if you were aware of that.
I never did that. I'm glad to hear that. That's somewhat mastery learning. They should change my 1 to at least a 2 on my transcript.
I think so. That's the least HBS can do. And also your schoolhouse.world is a very, very inspiring program. And I think peer learning, peer tutoring is really the way forward. And I wish you all the best for all your ventures. The mission that you are on has power to change the world. And on behalf of everyone present here today, from FLO, Vicky Arise, and all our friends, I'd like to wish you all the very best and all the success in the world. A big thank you to Sandeep Bapna and Stacey Olson from Khan Academy for all their help in putting together this program. And my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you who's tuned in today. We had more than 600 people who joined this session. I hope that this session has inspired you to challenge your thinking, push your own boundaries, keep learning, innovating, and growing constantly. Thank you. Stay well, stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salman. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Shimi, we can close now.